Welcome to the Skeptical Auditor Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Hernan Murdock. Today we continue our conversation with Kathleen Crawford, a trainer, consultant, content developer, and communications expert. In this episode, we talk about the importance of engaging auditors in their own project selection so they develop new skills, and for project managers to look beyond the immediate project and allocate time to the team skills. All that and more, starting now. Kathleen, we have spoken a bit about how internal auditors can better collaborate with their business partners, the process owners, and those individuals within the organization who we're going to, let's call them, audit, right? But another perspective to this is how do we better integrate and how do we collaborate with our teammates within our own department? So, what are your thoughts about that?
I have a couple of thoughts about that. Project by project, when I have a supervisory responsibility, I like to check in with each of the people who might be working with us as a team to see what they want to try. Are there things that they really want to try that they haven't had an opportunity to try? So I look for ways that that we can divide and conquer the work, but not with me assigning, not with me just saying, Hernan, you're going to do this, Kathleen, you're going to do that, but more like, what would you like to do? What do you feel confident in? What do you feel less confident in? And is there some subject matter in our audit that is of particular interest to you? Would you be, if you're sincerely interested, I'm happy to shuffle things up and change things around just to keep it fresh and people moving forward with developing those new skills and competencies, at least for them. And then to keep myself on target, I also write down, I have this grid where I will make sure to indicate what people already have great strength in, but what they might need some support in.
So I'm hearing a dual dynamic playing out here. One of them
Mm-hmm.
is that immediate project and what you need to do for this event, let's call it that, this project that you're working on or you're assigning people to. But you also have a longer range perspective as well. You're thinking from a
Mm-hmm.
development perspective. What are
Exactly.
people going to focus on? And that will give them, number one, the flexibility and the ownership and let's call it the responsibility as well to identify what areas they would like to strengthen or which areas they are weaker on and they would like to work on. So I hear a duality to it, which I think is very
Mm-hmm.
interesting and very good because part of that is how we need to think about our staff, our teams, and how we accomplish what we need to in the short term, but also develop them for the longer term.
Right. That is exactly how I feel about it. Um,
Okay.
and and maybe this too is something that is born of my own experience. It frustrated me sometimes not to kind of be pigeonholed in terms of uh, what I had done in the past and what I was good at. I was really, really good at compliance work, but that wasn't all I wanted to do. And so, yeah, I can read through contracts as well as anybody, and I can see whether or not we're following all the rules and the expectations, or whether the area is. But that I did feel pigeonholed in a couple of organizations that I worked for. But I think many of us these days really want to be able to flex more than one muscle. I mean, I may have a really great right bicep, but what if I'm not exercising my left arm? It's going to look a little, imbalanced. So anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's a very good point. And that's part of what we need to think about. And one of the things that I also try to advocate quite often is the importance of reflection and taking
Hmm.
time to think about where you are, where you're going, what's working, what's not working, and how you can course correct. And I think that you're showing us one of the ways that we can do that. And also, we can help our uh, staff to also acquire those skills and develop those skills. So, Very, very helpful there. Now, how about another thought related to this in terms of collaboration too? Because one of the things that's been around for a while is this concept of integrated auditing,
Hmm.
and that has been applied primarily or at least initially, in the context of business type, accounting type topics and IT related topics. Now, let's keep it
Right.
within that human element
Hmm.
and integrate people. So when
Hmm.
you're talking about who is going to be on the team and who's going to do what, do you also apply this idea of integration, collaboration in terms of skill sets so that you're thinking in terms of who is new to the department, who is new to the organization,
Hmm.
who has more experience, department slash organization, topic area, and so on? Do you also look at some of those dynamics in terms of how you can build a more, a better integrated team?
For sure. Absolutely. The We all have job descriptions uh, that enumerate a variety of skills and competencies as we're supposed to bring to work with us. But depending on where somebody is in their career, um, how early or how far developed they are in their career, I'm approaching a very big birthday myself, and I still want to learn and I still want to grow. And I presume that about all of the people that I come in contact with. You'll start to see if people want to specialize and kind of go into a narrower band, and they'll let you know that. But I think in general, people really do like to learn new things and develop new skills. So um, I really I start with that as a presumption, but I also say to people, if there is something that you want to specialize in and you really want to uh, put more of your investment, more of your time, more of your energy into that, then I will support that. But I think that um, to be successful as an internal auditor, I think we have to have a willingness to be more heterogeneous in the things that we can do and do on the work on the job. That's
And I
been my
believe that a lot
experience
of
anyway.
auditors want to be asked. They
Hmm.
probably intuitively know that they want to learn. They understand as professionals it's integral to their advancement and their success. But sometimes they probably feel that, well, if the boss never brings it up, maybe the boss just wants me to finish this project and the next project
Right.
and the next project, and you never allocate time to training. So I think that by engaging with them and putting it in front of them and saying, okay, what are some of the things that you would like to learn and how can we fit it into your schedule? I think it really elevates that topic and puts it front and center for them.
Well, and I also think that that means that whoever the auditor in charge is, or supervisor, or whatever terminology you use, we have to be careful not to over assign work to ourselves as well. If we're going to support somebody in their development, then we need to be available for regular touch points to see how things are going. Not supervise and oversee everything at the end. So this is not a linear process; it's a more cyclical process, or it should be. So I would argue that that anyone who is sincerely interested in developing their team members really needs to take the time to think about, how am I going to support the person, not just support the work? How am I going to supervise, or how am I going to evaluate the work product, but also evaluate the work process that we're using?
And in my experience, having spoken with a lot of auditors over the years, I find that a lot of them don't even make enough time at the end of the project to have
Oh
a debrief
gosh.
session and to capture lessons learned and all of that. But what I'm hearing from you is that that is important, of course, from what I'm
Hmm.
hearing. But you have already highlighted the beginning when you're assigning
Hmm.
people not just based on availability, but also some other affinity elements and development needs that you anticipate there. You're also talking about during and having capacity in part of who is let's call it the supervisor of that engagement, that in charge, to also allocate some time for development moments and helping them develop as they go as well. And then we can talk about what happens at the end of the engagement as well. So you're talking about this kind of an integrated approach to
Hmm.
development people as you go.
Well, one of my favorite techniques as we get toward the end, it is a retrospective. It's called a retrospective starfish. The only reason it's
Hmm.
called that is that when you draw it out, it's got 5 points. What do we want to do? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? What do we want to stop? What do we want to start? And then that fifth one is just, is there anything else that doesn't fit the other four that we really don't want to lose sight of? So I love this or I hate this could be an example. And
I,
but taking the time is necessary. It's necessary.
yes, and so many times we overschedule ourselves. There are so many instances where people have told me that as a senior, let's call it a senior who may be supervising or
Mhm.
maybe in charge, but this individual has so many test procedures to perform
Right.
as well that they barely have time for the administrative tasks. And that is just administrative work. And then what you're highlighting is that other dimension in terms of training and development that also should happen simultaneously. I love this. This is fantastic, Kathleen. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by ACI Learning. Are you looking for CPE credits, professional development, to continue your education, or a custom team training solution? Here at ACI Learning, we've been building high-quality training for over 40 years, meeting the needs of every learner. Our training solutions will keep you and your team engaged and motivated to learn, helping students stay sharp in their field and better serve the organization. Join thousands of global audit, risk, and compliance professionals. Visit acilearning.com to find out how we're disrupting the audit learning space.
We are continuing our conversation with Kathleen. And Kathleen, one of the things that is so important for a lot of chief audit executives and everyone else in that department is in terms of their skills. What kinds of skills should auditors have? And one of the ones that come to mind is interviewing. So, what are some of the
Mm.
things that auditors should do or perhaps should not do when it comes to interviewing so that we are more effective when we're doing it and we continue to build on the things we were talking about just earlier in terms of collaboration? So, what are
Mhm.
some of the things that will help us be better interviewers?
Well, earlier I talked about how important it is to ask rather than tell. And of course, interviewing is all about asking questions. Um, I do believe that if you're going to have a successful interview, you need to take a certain amount of time to plan out how you'd like the conversation to go. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go exactly the way that you want it to, but
Right.
the interviewing has to, I think, really does have to be planned in terms of how you're going to open. So, what are we going to do in terms of building rapport? How are we going to introduce ourselves and hopefully make people feel comfortable with us? Talk about our plans for the time that we have, and there are there's a introduction, then there's a sort of a um, it's called feed forward. It's a transition phase where before we get to the real, Q&A portion of things, we make sure that the timing is still okay for them. I don't know about you, but I have certainly had a couple of instances where we had the interview on the calendar, and I was ready to proceed, and the person in front of me, whether on the screen or whether in person, uh, just didn't seem to be engaged. I think you have to
Yes.
ask the question, is this still a good time for you? Because if you're going to get anything good out of the interaction, everybody needs to be committed to being there. So, feed forward is a way to test all of that stuff before you really get down and dirty with your Q&A. And so I that might be something that people don't know about, but it's a hint. It's a helpful hint
I
for
think
those
it's
of
a
us who have
great
thought it.
idea. I think it's a great idea. And
Yeah.
one of the things that when you started just talking just now, the first thing you talked about was building rapport. And I
Hmm.
like it because, sometimes people will talk about, well, are you asking the right questions? Are you asking the right person? Don't make the questions too complicated that they may be confused trying to answer the question. All of those things are important. But I like
Hmm.
the fact that you started with building rapport, right? You want to put
Right.
them at ease. You want to make sure that they feel that it's going to be a productive meeting. So let's invest in it and let's make it so. So I think that that is fantastic advice there. So as we're thinking about different skills, let's continue on that vein then. What are some of the other skills that auditors should have? And perhaps in terms of soft skills, what are some of the things that you see, that you believe, and what you have researched and heard about that are very important that auditors should really focus on?
Well, we've spoken about listening already, and
Mhm.
I really cannot overstress how important that is. That it should be less about us doing all the talking and more about the people across the table from us doing more talking. I would also say that we need to have a nice quiver of problem solving techniques, problem solving tools, um, whatever form those might take. Some of them are more creative, some of them are more analytical. But when we're trying to understand something that is a puzzle or a problem that we come across in the audit work that we've done, whether it's through the process or whether it's something to do with a specific area that we analyzed that seems to be broken in some way, do we have a good set of tools to help us problem solve? Can we employ root cause analysis, for example? Root cause analysis is um, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. It's methodical, but a lot of times people skip over some of the steps. So unless we are focused on all five of the root cause analysis steps, we may make a recommendation that's beside the point. So those are a couple of things that I think are really important for auditors to try
And
to do.
And I think that that's very important as well for another reason, and that is that in some cases, auditors focus, I don't want to say disproportionately, but their focus really is on describing the problem. And they're not
Hmm.
really spending enough time, or maybe they don't even think about it. I've had conversation with auditors to say that it's not their job to write recommendations or to pursue corrective action. That is management's job. So again, we can, that's a whole other conversation, of course. But
Right.
from best practice, from the IA standards, in my experience as a practitioner and yours as well, we have the opportunity. Let's not call it a duty. Let's call it an opportunity to do
Mhm.
more than just list the problems, helping them come up with some ideas. And we don't have to do all the thinking, which is, I think, another thing that you're highlighting here, is that this is a collaborative effort, and we can
Mhm.
engage with our process owners, with our business partners, and together we can come up with great solutions to issues. So I like this as a good starting point in terms of problem solving. What are some of the other skills that you believe auditors should develop?
Ways to make ourselves more um, not not efficient in the main, but this is what I'm about to describe is a tactic. Maybe I don't know that it has a name per se, but it's a tactic. Um, a lot of times when we're working on a project, we may pick things up and put them down, because we have to move on to a meeting, or we're juggling multiple parts of the audit program. So the tactic that, and maybe you can come up with a good name for this, but the tactic is not to, when you know that you have a commitment that's starting, say, at the top of the hour, don't work right up to um, X 59 minutes and then jump into your meeting or whatever have you, but give yourself a little bit of a buffer. So maybe we call this buffers. Buffers are um, for looking back over your shoulder and seeing how far you've come. Buffers are
Mhm.
opportunities for you to jot down, um, when you're working on a particular test, for example. This is what I did. This is what I found. This is the very next thing that I'm going to do when I return to this thing, to this task. A lot
I
of
love that.
times that gets just doesn't get considered. We're like pressing so hard to get things done that we lose thread. And then what I see. I know where your head is. I know you well enough, Hernan, to know exactly where your head is going. So go ahead, jump right in here.
Well, I love what you're describing because what of part of my thought process was that sometimes when people bring up this idea of a buffer or a transition, quite often they bring it up in the context of preparing for the next meeting, not
Right,
necessarily debriefing on the previous one. And I
right,
think that is something we need to give proper attention to so
right.
that we make sure we put everything in its right place and we're ready to pick it up later, like you say, when you're introducing this idea and this practice. So we need to do that, and then we can prepare for the next thing. But one or the other, I think both are very important, and I think
Hmm.
that we need to prepare ourselves, and then demonstrate it in our own behavior. Right, that's a big part of management and leadership
Sure.
is leading by example, and then helping our teammates also acquire that skill. I love this. I think this is a very. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, oh, why haven't we thought about this before? This is a really important thing to do. I can see it.
I um I just remembered the first place that I heard about this. Um, it's called a closeout process, and a woman, time management expert in Cambridge, Massachusetts, came up with it. She should have trademarked it or something. Her name is Pamela Christan, and she I remember being in a course with her on a in another job, but I practice it regularly, and it helps me so much because then I don't have to shuffle a bunch of papers and say, "Where was I? What was I doing?" Instead, I can jump right in because I can read that list and know exactly where I left off, and I can pick that up as soon as my meeting is done or whatever have you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Kathleen. Great suggestions, great advice for all of us. We'll be better off by embracing all of them. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Skeptical Auditor podcast, and a big thank you to our guest, Kathleen Crawford. If you're looking for more ways to stay ahead of the curve and earn CPEs, check out Audit Pro TV On Demand, subscription learning for auditors by auditors. Visit acilearning.com/auditprotv.